Now, Jodhpur had an engineering college, but with only civil engineering, and the first principal was ex-Roorkee. I had, sorry to say, but strong dislike for civil engineering. And it would have been very convenient because it was almost like a walking distance from my residence, not exactly walking, but not too far. In 20 minutes, I could have walked to the MBM Engineering College, and admission was guaranteed because I had rank. But I didn't even apply because then there may be a family, why don't you do this and become XE and executive engineer? And now it's something I detested. And I jumped the queue for a minute. By the time I finished PhD, some of my contemporaries were bungalow owners in Jodhpur. So you can come to your own conclusion. How did that happen? I was still struggling to make a living after all the studies. And the problem that I faced was my family was not economically well off. So how to fund my education in Jodhpur, there would have been no problem. So I applied for, and I went to my teachers, none of them were familiar with chemical engineering. So one said, oh, Banaras mein hoga shayad. Somehow it occurred to me that why don't I send an application to VJTI in Bombay. They promptly replied that we don't have chemical engineering, but next door to us, there is UDCT. They forwarded my communication to them. They wrote to me that, yes, you can be considered. Form was only 2 rupees. So I filled the form and I got admitted. In June 1954, I arrived in Bombay. There was a schoolmate of mine, very dear friend. We used to share the same bench. It was a Jain based school called Sardar School. And he came to receive me. Bombay was very different in those days. So from Bombay Central Station, I was taken in a Victoria to the famous Kalva Devi. And my first experience was, this is a 4-story building, no lift. But on the 4th floor, without any pump, water was flowing like mad. I mean, real force of, I had never experienced that. So I said, hurrah, oh my God, I can have real enjoyable bath because there is no problem. And Jodhpur always had some kind of, we didn't have real water shortage, but we didn't have ample. And he brought me to, he knew the geography because after passing high school, he came for the family establishment in Bombay, whereas I studied into science and he moved to arts. He didn't take up science. So my journey began that way. But how to finance was still a problem. So a neighbor of ours had a philanthropic, and he had business in Bombay. And he talked to another trust. And I'm going to tell you sums which will look ludicrous today, but there were plenty in those days in 1954. 40 rupees, both these philanthropists were giving me per month. That means I was getting 80 rupees per month. The annual fees at that time was some 200 and something. I could make a comfortable living paying hostel fees and all that. That's how my journey started. And because I didn't have funds after graduation, I thought I'll do post-graduation in Bombay. The Government of India scholarship was available. And due to bureaucracy, that money won't come on time. So I had to borrow money because I was the only person in my class who was bent upon doing research. And job opportunities were extraordinary. We could really shout around and claim that I have many job offers before graduation. My classmates got jobs before, I would have also got, but I didn't appear for any interview because I was very clear in my mind that I will do research. Then the person who was supposed to guide me, who had a PhD from Ohio State University, decided to go back to America. So I was left. There was Professor N.R. Kamath, who became the first head of chemical engineering in IIT Bombay while I was just doing my master's. He was from our first batch of chemical engineering graduates, but in UD City was professor of polymer technology. Uh, he was gracious enough to take me. He was quite a dreaded person in terms of very sharp wit and all. But I went on wonderfully well with him. Most of the time discussions were on the topic other than my own research topic, which I was sort of self-triggered, and I was helping other research students. There was one chap 2 years senior to me. He had still not finished. So I had to wait in the queue because it would have been a bit embarrassing for that fellow. So I was helping other fellow research students in the polymer tech. There was none in chem. I was the only full-time research student in chemical engineering, only one. And I had one whole big lab to my, but a lot of my thermodynamic work was done in library, and only a small part of experimental work was done in that lab. This was 1958. In December 1960, I was given temporary lecturer's post. I loved teaching. Research and teaching were even during my school days, in inter-science days, I used to coach my classmates. We had a reasonable good house, so they could come to my house and I could coach them. They were, but later on, my lifelong friends. Some went away, so I lost contact with them. I came, so money from the philanthropist made. So after graduation, I did masters in Bombay. Scholarship didn't come for 6 months. So I took loan from my classmates who were prosperous. I said, you can trust me that I'll return your money. And that goes on. An incredible opportunity came from late Professor Dr. G.P. Kane. He had strong contacts because PhD was from Imperial College. Cambridge Professor Dankworth, whose name you are given, contacted him to recommend some student from India. They had bursary, that is grant. The British call it bursary, to support with a very good scholarship, including travel. And my name was put up and I was accepted. Now I was teaching because there were only 2 teachers at that time, a lot of big problem, I tell you. So I wanted to teach one particular course which I knew nobody else will teach. So I was taking 12, 13 lectures a week. And I left only in September. And I wanted to go by boat because till the last day I was teaching. I needed some rest. That was also because later on you asked me a question that on my return journey, how did I? So I went by boat. It was a unique experience for me because I had never traveled by boat at that time. Now the boat was not to the UK, it was an Italian boat. It went to southern part of Italy, and from there I went by train. So a very interesting journey. Very interesting anecdote that because in those days condensed milk was used to make coffee, and that won't taste well. So I got used to drinking black coffee. That remained part of my life later on, that I could drink black coffee. So I arrived in Cambridge. Accommodation in Cambridge was negotiated in advance. I go to the department. I have an audience with Professor Dankworth, and he asked me, what are my interests? What I will be interested in working? So I told him, look, I have a lot of interest in thermodynamics, and I gave a small presentation of what work I had done. So immediately he realized that I had chemical orientation. So he says, how about working on this topic? I said, sir, thank you very much, but please give me 2 months because I'll study this topic very exhaustively and then launch my experiments. So I prepared a working note after my intensive study that this is what, and I plan to do these experiments. He was an Oxford graduate in physical chemistry. And there was a very, very famous man called R.P. Bell. who had become Fellow of Royal Society at a very young age, and he had an incredible reputation in Oxford. So he said, I'll drive you to, because that area of bronze-based catalysis, he was the Maibab. You know, he was the key man, and there was another person in Denmark. So I went and conversation. I said, these are my views on this bronze-based catalysis for CO2 hydration. I would be grateful if you comment on the strategy that I outlined. Oh, you know, the Britishers have their own sense of humor. Oh, that looks very logical. On the way, Danckwerts had told me that it is nonsense. Then just keep quiet. Then I mustered some strength, because in my intensive study, I came out with some riddle. So I asked Professor Bell, please respond to this query of mine. You'll be surprised with the answer, that he had raised the same question with the man in bronze-based catalysis in Denmark. But sir, that doesn't answer my question.
Okay.
so Danckwerts also chuckled that I was. So I launched my experiment just after Christmas vacation. And believe me, in 4 months, I'd cracked the problem. 5 months, we sent the paper to the most renowned journal, Transactions of Faraday Society. It was accepted like a shot. And Danckwerts wrote on the postcard. In those days, this acceptance used to come on a postcard. Can you believe that?
Okay.
I will never forget that. This is 1962 postcard. And there is a handwritten note, which I'll never forget in my life. Sharma, the referees have swallowed the matter. The referees have swallowed the matter.
Swallowed.
No comment.
Okay. Swallowed means they have digested that.
They thought everything is fine.
Perfect.
Oh my God. I was elated beyond description. I thought that paper may be butchered or something.
Okay.
And my esteem with the Danckwerts went up sky high.
Okay.
And I was left to myself. Once in a while, we'll bump against in the corridor or on the stair or in the lift. Sharma, keep me informed. So I would send periodically notes to him. If he had some comment, he will. So really speaking, in a year's time, I had enough material to submit a thesis for PhD.
Great.
But I wanted to complete full 3 years and take up topics which were not considered earlier for my work. And I worked on them. Some ideas came to me completely on my own. So he let me publish paper again in transaction solely in mining. Then towards the end of my stay, about 3-4 months before my conclusion in 1964, somewhere around February, March, I suggested to him that why don't we write a monograph of absorption of CO2, carbon dioxide in amines and alkalis, to show for the first time in the world a write-up from basic fundamentals to process design. It appealed to him. I gave him a skeleton of what I want to. I kept on doing that on my weekends. See, I didn't run after girls. I didn't drink. So my British students were very scared of me. Say, you have done work for 2-3 PhDs, you are making our life miserable. I said, it's up to you to come to your own conclusion. And I had prepared my manuscript till the last day, which was a Sunday, and I left it on his desk. Monday morning, I left for India, first by train and by a boat, because I wanted again rest, because so I'm answering your question that how did you write? So in those days was terrible. Foreign exchange was, you people wouldn't even know how difficult it was to get foreign exchange. Even though I was getting scholarship, good scholarship, I needed initial money, because the day I land or on, and that money was given to me on repatriation basis. That is within 6 months of my going to UK, I must return, and that was easily sum of 50 pounds. I still remember that I had to, and I dutifully returned that money. So this was a French boat, Messagerie Maritime, from the French port. And by that time, I was used to European food. I was vegetarian all through. I never drank, although Cambridge was a very wet city, particularly on the weekends. But British were, contrary to what many people say, British have, full faith in whatever habits you have. So I was never instigated to take beer or something, no. I was the safe guy. So on the weekend parties of my research students, fellow research students, I used to be the caretaker to take them to their. I was the safest guy because nothing. I won't go high at all. So it was a wonderful time. Now, somewhere in March, when this new idea of mine, which were about to publish on absorption of carbon dioxide, and I took up carbonyl sulfide, it occurred to him that it was an idea worth patenting. And that this was a shell department of chemical engineering in those days. And Rothschild, one of the most famous banker family, one of the richest families, you might have heard their name, Rothschilds. Stanford himself had an aristocratic background. And if you want to hear something good in English, I'll tell you what he, in his autobiography, he says, I grew up in genteel poverty.
Okay.
I grew up in genteel poverty. Instead of saying I had an aristocratic upbringing, his father, his uncle was an admiral. In those days, British Navy, he was, and his father was a judge.
Okay.
So, and he had studied in Oxford, and before that in a expensive private school. So he had this kind of aristocratic blood. He didn't think small. So he just dropped a line to Rothschild. I got a chap. British have a very fine. I picked up many things in English language during my semester. I had a penchant for that. But my initial background of English when I came to Bombay was like country English.
Yeah.
My classmates from Bombay had much better English than I had. But today I can beat all of them hollow in terms of my command on English language and my vocabulary, with due modesty. So he said, I have got a chap who has got everything on his fingertips, and his ideas might appeal to. He was a director of Shell. My God, he was so powerful, Rothschild. Immediately, fellows put in action. Then comes, within 3-4 days, a man from Shell to Cambridge, has interaction with me. He said, right now, first of all, we'll have a preliminary patent it was solely in mind. Dankworth said, I have not contributed anything to it. You are the sole author. So a preliminary patent was taken. 2 weeks later, I was asked to go to Hague and present my case to a group of very top level people. I still have that scene in front of me. Since you want to know all this, I'm telling you, I really. So discussion went on. So I mustered strength and I said, I know you gentlemen, there was no lady, you will find with your strength ways and means by saying that my idea is nothing original. So if that is the case, let us close the meeting. No. Oh, you have got, and we want to take it over. My God, it was big news because £1,000, I don't know how you came to know about this £1,000. It was a huge sum, in those days. And a big news in Cambridge department that Sharma has lent it in. And I was about to leave. It was very handy for me when I came to Bombay, that kind of money. So you said why I came back, how I came back. I'm now make the connection. I was given a handsome offer that you can work in Shell Holland, Shell England, and NOCIL is coming up in Bombay. So 3 years, 4 years later, you can be a very senior executive in no-sill, and that was very fat salaries and all, It so happened that when you don't want, you get offers. In Bombay, I had offers 4 times. Although people say I had a flying start as a professor at the age of 27, what people, that Bombay University was different in those days. Later on, there was decadence in Bombay. They were daring enough to appoint me. And Dankwart's command on English language was such. He taught me one thing, which has remained as part of my life: brevity. Whenever you write a manuscript, not a single sentence should be extra. If you remove one sentence from your manuscript, means you removed something. No verbose. So he sent a letter of recommendation for me, which I never had the privilege to see that. But when it was read out in the management council, because some fellows objected, saying that a fellow at 27, you are appointing him in full professor. So the then rector, like vice chancellor, because Bombay University, I used to have part-time vice chancellor in those days. He read and everybody shut up. Now, what was the content of that letter? To date, I don't know. But it must have been exceptionally strong for the university to beat the path that they had normally followed. And here I was. But it was a big gamble for me, because at age of 27, if I failed, where there were 3 faculty members, all of them were my teachers in the department. That was the only strength of the department in those days. I was still a bachelor. I took the challenge, but I want to tell that people didn't realize that it was a big gamble for me, because if I had failed, it would have been a stigma for the rest of the life.
Right.
I worked very hard. I was a bachelor. I told my family, I mean, we are from Jodhpur conservative family. I was too old to get married by their standards, I said, no, I won't marry for a year and a half. Little bit, they were also scared that I might marry out of caste or something. I said, no, I will meet the girl you choose and then decide. So year and a half, I was working 24/7. I still did not have the accommodation on campus, but I was working for very long hours. Fortunately, 2 research students joined me almost immediately after because one faculty member left with whom these fellows were registered. And their topics didn't appeal to me. I gave them new topics. They also were working very hard along with me. And one of them was the person with my first PhD student, Ashok Nanda, who later on went to US on postdoctoral. In those days, 1967, he got a postdoctoral fellowship of $9,000. He was a rich fellow. By the way, he belonged, you might have heard of the famous Nanda family in Jammu.
Yes, sir, I know.
He belonged to that, where they had controlled the entire transportation and all in Jammu, Kashmir.
Okay.
Big network of, but this fellow was unusual. He was the youngest son in the family. Very hardworking person. This is the secret of success. No matter how intelligent you are in engineering sciences, since you did engineering, no matter how clever you are, there is no substitute for hard work.
Right.
1 year we struggled very hard. No money. How to do research? So while coming to India, I bought a typewriter, because in those days typewriter was a big thing, and they would allow up to certain amount because I was away for 3 years. And I had a huge FRP box in which I had all the journals. That came separately. My ship got stuck in Aden. I had to be in Bombay on a particular day. So 3-4 days I was in Aden. Somehow the shipping line converted our journey from Aden to Bombay by Air India flight. So I landed in Bombay a day before I was supposed to appear for the interview. Well, I was lucky. Otherwise, it would have been another disaster. And during those days, I was putting my hand on the deck, ship deck. I will print out, oh, these are the ideas. one thing I decided, I will not work on the ideas I generated in Cambridge, on which at least 3 people got PhD in Cambridge, what ideas I had shared in my thesis. But I said, I will not work in this area. I'm going to work on a totally new area. And the very first area I took up was in stiff competition with the work that was going on in Holland. They were struggling to find a method of finding effective interfacial area in liquid-liquid extraction equipment. I hit upon a very simple idea. Simpler the idea, better are the chances of. And Ashok Nanda had. Now we couldn't even buy that chemical, so we made that chemical by starting materials being gifted to us. And it was a Sunday afternoon after my lunch with the paying guests in a suburb of Bombay, because university accommodation was still not available. We were chatting and I said, Ashok, I think today we'll hit upon something. And it was an experiment being done in a beaker, which made us world famous, because this paper went like a shot of a new method of measuring interfacial area in liquid-liquid system. And Dutch fellows felt very, very bad. They acknowledged that we were working in this area for a long time. We didn't hit upon an idea. I said, sometimes it happens, and that paper was accepted like a shot. And within 3 months, it was in the editorial of the famous American Chemical Society journal, Industrial Engineering Chemistry. So we got known in the global atmosphere in such a short time. And we were the first one from India to keep on publishing papers in the most famous chemical engineering journals of the world, where no IIT was able to compete with us, even though we were so small. So we got strength that we can work on idea oriented. By the way, we also worked on equipment oriented. We got equipment gifted. I started work on packed columns and all that, and newer approaches in co-current flows and all that, which also we published extensively. And one of the area of equipment oriented research, which we did, J.B. Joshi did with me, gas inducing impellers and mechanically agitated contactors, we did something absolutely outstanding. Sorry to use that word. And our aim was whatever research we do should find publication in the most learned journals of the world. At the same time, we should be able to demonstrate that in the marketplace. You'll be pleased to know that large number of hydrogenators in India using gas were designed by my erstwhile collaborator J.B. Joshi, all basis of the work that was done with me. And one of the celebrated paper on gas-inducing impellers in the world is ours. So is all the paper on bubble columns of showing backmixing characteristics and all. So sum and substance is, ideas matter much more than affluence of facility. If you read the life sketches of many Nobel laureates, they will say, thank goodness that kind of sophisticated thing was not made available to me, so I had to think very hard. And you will find in early years, many Nobel Prizes went to people who were very hardworking, had very original ideas, including the famous ammonia, Haber-Bosch, one of the greatest ever achievement in the history of chemical industry and chemical sciences. 5,000 catalysts they had screened. Both got Nobel Prize. Haber got Nobel Prize, Bosch also got Nobel Prize. So you have put a question later on about PhDs. I'll tell you something most people have forgotten. You know what happens? The memory of people is short-lived when it is convenient. There was really no market for PhDs in late 60s even. I said that what is the use of my graduating PhDs who will go to academic world only or to CSR laboratory? The real habitat is industry. We generate ideas, they have to be taken further by industry. So I did something, people talk of marketing and all. So we academics have to also do marketing. So I decided, by that time I was in a position to talk to various executives of chemical industry. I got known in relatively short time. Here is a young chap who is doing something. So I went to managing directors of chemical companies in Bombay, because Bombay was the hub of chemical industry. And lest somebody down the line sabotage, I would simultaneously meet the general manager.
Okay.
Same occasion or different occasion. I said, why don't you test out PhDs who had a good bachelor's degree, whom you would have hired, and see the difference? They took me on my word. And one after another, these PhDs did a great job in chemical industry. I want to specifically name Indian Organic Chemical, which developed many technologies on their own and commercialized. And several of my PhDs worked in that company, but from an early stage. Now you would find it hard to believe that by 1973, 74, we didn't have enough PhDs to supply.
Okay.
Now, ChemEng had not produced a single PhD, although UDCT had produced many PhDs in chemical technology, none in chemical. Will you just give me 1 minute?
Yes.
This ring. Enough. So there not a single PhD had come out. The first full-throated chemical PhD came out, Ashok Nanda, in 1967. Then we had no very bright students, whether it was Mashelkar, later on. There's a person who had an extraordinarily celebrated paper, P.R. Ramachandran, who was a polio victim, brilliant in mathematics. I mean, he has written now books. He worked in India for a few years. Now he's settled in America. He is in St. Louis. He's written books, highly mathematical. So that was the first PhD thesis in India, which was 100% theoretical and all analytical solutions, no numerical solution. Till then, not a single PhD had come out in chemical engineering in India, which was 100% theoretical. Because I realized this fellow cannot do experiments properly. So, and I knew he was brilliant. He was also a chess champion. His paper became one of the most celebrated paper and made us world famous, because we came out with the concept of, microphases, something which is smaller than diffusion film thickness, what wonders it can do. And it had commercial applications. We showed where this concept will be used, including in flue gas desulfurization. Now that paper was so good that one of the father figure in chemical engineering in MIT, T.K. Sherwood, it is in black and white. He wrote, I wanted to solve this problem and I found it was already done.
Okay.
And quotes the reference.
Okay.
So that put us on another pedestal. So Nanda's paper, Ramachandran's paper. Then we wrote a state-of-art thing on simultaneous absorption of gases. It was such a big hit in the Institution of Chemical Engineers, UK, that we got Moulton Medal. And small anecdote I want to tell you. There was a small fund available at the university to go overseas. So we applied. That was the only time I took money from Bombay University to go abroad. After that, my host paid for me. Not a single time I took money from Bombay University to go. I went innumerable times, but always for short visits. So they say we can only fund one. I say, if you can fund only one, Ramachandran will go, not me. So they were astounded. He's saying, you are saying your student will go? By that time, he had become temporary lecturer. I said, yes, I want to give him the credit. So then they give to both.
Okay.
I'm just telling you.
Yes.
So the reason why I'm giving you this, every research student of mine during their course, I would train them to write papers. So first I will ask them to write paper on a topic solely in their name. And there was a journal which would give an audit, some kind of honorarium. So in those days, if you got an honorarium 500 rupees in 60s and early 70s, it was a decent sum for an undergraduate. What was the value of fellowship in those days? 400 rupees for PhD scholars.
Okay.
So if you got 500 rupees,
Yeah.
it was not a bad sum,
Yes.
And one of the jobs of mine was people who are economically weak. After graduation, they wanted to take up a job so that they can support their family. And I would try to convince them that you have interest in doing post-graduation, I will get you extra money. So number of persons I was able to, because we had this position of demonstrator, what was called later on associate lecturer. So they get a salary, which is more than scholarship. So they can support their family. If they are day scholars, they don't have expense of hostel. So there were many people whom I was able to induce. Similarly, later on, I was able to induce women to do PhD in chemical. One of my brightest students was Bhavani Janki Ram. All our 4 papers came back with no comments of the referees. I mean, it's pleasure to have people. So my aim was from beginning, I told you that I had job offers, not only overseas, I had academic jobs also. I had an offer from Oregon and an offer from Waterloo, because those people who were connected with Cambridge were visiting and they would hear about me. He said, how about joining us? I said, thank you very much. But I'm hell-bent upon going to my alma mater. IIT Delhi, by his British collaboration, I was being approached. I said, why don't you take a position in IIT Delhi? I said, I'm going back to my mother institute where I have moral responsibility to go back. And people thought I was foolish that I am leaving such a prosperous job in Bombay, and that time you will get a shock. The salary was Suka 1,000 rupees a month. Today, starting salary of a professor is 2,30,000 rupees a month. And why was 1,000 rupees a month? Out of that, provident fund would be cut, tax would be cut. So what was coming in my hand when I was paying guests? I was paying the money to my host. But I was prepared to take it up all because I had this passion to bring up people, teach, enjoy teaching, but with research and consulting, because we in applied sciences must take our research to the marketplace. It's like surgeon. The closest example I can give, you can't only teach theory of surgery. You have to perform surgery. So it has been a wonderful journey. When I'll jump your question, but I want to tell you, because all these years I kept on having students after. Many of these persons who stayed with me versus those who went to America, none of them had a publication record comparable to students who stayed with me. None. Whether it was Mashelkar or whether it was J.B. Joshi or J.D. Yadav, Ramachandran. No. They never also got opportunity to have publication in their own name when they were in US. Whereas they had with me in Chem Science, where there was hardly any faculty member in any institution in India who was able to publish in Chem Science. We were publishing left and right. Now, my relationship with Danvers became stronger and stronger. He was rather a shy person. He wouldn't easily interact. But I was probably the most intimately connected with him, if I can use the word with him, because somehow it took, he took me. So within 3 years of my returning, he sponsored me under a distinguished fellowship under British Council to spend 7 weeks in UK, and paid very well in terms of all expenses and little honorarium and all. So I went and spent, I went to several British chemistry departments. Within 3 months, 3 years, in 1968, that is the 4th year after came, there was the international conference, tripartite meeting of Canadian Chemical Engineering Institute, American Institute of Chemical Engineering, Institution of Chemical Engineers, UK, or mass transfer with chemical reaction. I was invited to, that was Mashelkar's paper. So I went to Montreal to present that paper. And the first fellow to ask me question was Sherwood. I fielded it all right. They say he fired and I fielded.
Okay.
So that gave us another international. Now this is unusual in the life of a person. Sometimes when I reflect, how did this all happen? It looks like fairy tale to me that all this happened in such a short time. Dankworth was then writing a book on gas absorption. So during this visit, when I went, he said, "Why don't you look at my manuscript?" So I made many. Then he wanted examples. So in the book, he acknowledges that these examples were all provided by M M Sharma. And you are quoting his autobiographical part. By the way, you don't know, there's another book, Life on an Edge, his biographical thing by Peter Very. Peter Very, Varey, Peter Very, where everybody whom he contacted wanted to know more about Dankworth. Everybody told him, contact Sharma.
Okay.
So he would have long telephonic conversations with me, email exchanges, and I'll tell him this part, many things he didn't know about. Why I'm mentioning all this is we wrote paper together after my return also. Apart from that monograph. So I think I had maximum number of publications with him as a co-author, even though I had independent publications, 2 independent publications while I was doing PhD, and other papers were joint. So somewhere in 1972, 73, mind you, only 8 years after I became professor, I was still only 35. Chemical Engineering Science of a government press at that time had a system of independent editors. So he approached me that you be an independent editor. I was flabbergasted. I wrote back saying that I'm most grateful to you for what you said, but I am in no age group to cultivate enemies. Because so many papers will get turned down. And as an editor, I will get, instead of kudos, curses. So he realized that, and therefore he accepted. But 2 years, 3 years later, and he was very good in quips, just 1 line, 2 lines. Sharma, you can take on enemies.
Yeah. Okay.
So I opened a new chapter for an Indian to be an independent editor in one of the most famous journals of chemical engineering. I felt, and then I had a policy that I don't want to continue in anything that I do for a long time. I want. So I quit. And that I recommended Mashelkar to be, so he became independent editor of Chemical Engineering Science. Institution of Chemical Engineers had a journal. I was associate editor. And after a certain period, I quit. And Kumar from Bangalore became. Canadian Journal of Chemical Engineering, I quit. J.B. Joshi became. Now, this has been my consistent policy throughout the world that I will not, I sat in few committees to select Bhatnagar awardee. Afterwards, when I approached, I was chairman for 2 or 3 committees. I was member for 2 or 3 committees. That is end. I will not now participate in selection of Bhatnagar fellows. It is good, same person should not hang on. And I think people have a habit of sticking on the positions of importance. And I demonstrated this by I quit. Nobody quit at that time. I was the first one to quit editorship of Chemical Engineering Science. No other editor had quit, independent editor. They all wanted to continue because of the name and fame, no? Because it comes on the thing. And unlike American Chemical Society journals, you're not truly, here I was truly independent. By the way, one thing you do not know, that I'm the only person from India who has an international award in chemical engineering of Institution of Chemical Engineers, UK. This is called M M Sharma Award. And no one else has. When I got that communication that would you accept an award being named after you, I said, I'm overwhelmed that you have thought of me for an international award. I said, that's very nice. Also, I'm the first engineer in the history to become engineer, not chemical engineer, to become fellow of Royal Society. That too, almost 30 years ago, 1990. Then I got Royal Society's medal also, called Livery Medal, which no Indian has got. So it has been a wonderful journey. And when I was felicitated the time of superannuation in 97, my well-wishers and all wanted to endow many things in my name, collect money in my name. They came to me to take my permission. I said, I'm flattered that you want to do this. I have one condition only. And that condition is not a single penny will come to me. All the money will go. So since I was so fond of library, I said the biggest chunk will go for the Udcity library, or now ICT, the only library in the country which has an endowment of its own. Okay. Out of my own fund in 97, 1 crore, they collected 3 crores in my name in that time. Huh? 97 is big money. Yeah. And 1 crore went to library endowment, which was later on buttressed also. So ICT library has, even if every fund is cut, they have some income of their own from the endowment. So Bombay University at that time, looking at my interest and contribution, in the most unusual feature, they named the library after me. Okay. So ICT library is called Prof M M Sharma Library. So 2-3 days ago, there was a library conference and I addressed and I told them the anecdotal part of the library in the early stages and all. Today, what is happening, people all sit on the desk, not realizing that going to library, everybody says ambience matters. When you enter a library, ambience is different. If you only do structured reading, it is not a cultured way for an academic. You must do unstructured reading. Go and read randomly some journals and all. Otherwise, your knowledge remains confined. So because you mentioned the walking encyclopedia, because I had in Britain, in Cambridge also, there was a joke. There is no need to go to library, go to Sharma. I used to feel flattered, you know. I used to feel flattered. I really loved library because storehouse of knowledge, and I feel elated when I sit in a library. That day, in the end, I said, because of this pandemic, one of the things I'm missing is hanging around in library, even publicly. Whenever I was going to United States with my son and daughter, I said, leave me for some time in your public library so that I can read different newspapers, different magazines, and time will pass by just like that because time is not on me. So I have covered many points which you have raised during this narration. But I'm open to whatever else you want to.
So, Professor Sharma, I just, as I've noted down some of the points here, though you have summarized the whole of the journey, I would like to go forward, sir, and some points I would like to raise which are untouched. Like you became the first person to patent an idea. I mean, we can patent tangible things. You patent an idea and sold it for £1,000 to the Shell.
I mentioned that, no?
You have already mentioned that. So, was there such any other case at that time also, sir?
None. None.
And I also want to ask you, sir, through your entire story, I came to know one thing. You belong to a very humble family. You yes. You had education, which was taken, as you mentioned, philanthropist and on scholarships. Sir, what resisted you from taking very good jobs which were available at that time, so many to you, and you could kept continuing?
I wanted to follow my passion. My passion was to teach and research, and then consult with industry. So from very beginning, I've been consultant for more than 50 years. After my retirement, I'm far more financially prosperous than I was I charge what fees I think I deserve. No limit. I am still in demand for as a consultant. Obviously,
So
I contribute something, because no industry will give me a fee where the benefit is not at least 10 times the money they are paying
that's
me.
true. That's true. So similarly, a professor should also return back to the university or something through consultancy.
In our case, 1/3 was deducted.
Okay.
So now that I've retired, there is no deduction, no, except income tax.
Okay.
In the university system, we had originally an upper limit. Then I argued with the university system that you are next door to a high court. But you will be amused to hear this statement.
Right, sir.
I said, these guys, advocates, they have a stopwatch and charge on this. And you are coming in our way of higher consulting fee. You should be proud of it.
Yes, sir.
Because 1/3 you are taking. So we were able to raise fees that 1/3 cut was more than the salary of the person in the university. So we are pocket to the, I was pocket to the university.
That's true.
K.V. Joshi was pocket to the university. They found this argument convincing.
Okay.
Then they put a highly elevated limit. Then they say this limit can also be crossed on merits of the case. The first
Okay.
person to cross that merit was J.B. Joshi.
Okay.
And that letter which I wrote to the university, copy of which I gave to J.B. Joshi, he has safely kept it, because I used such a language that university would have found it hard not to accept my recommendation.
Okay.
I said we should feel justifiably proud that one of our faculty member can command such a high consulting fees. So what happened? The financial disability within 2 or 3 years, because I was consultant within a year after I joined. So I could support my family. Get more.
Sir, I want to, though you have mentioned about your guide, Professor Dankwart, you have already mentioned about him. In his book, Insight into Chemical Engineering, he has written that Sharma was the most diligent student he ever supervised. And though you have mentioned about it, but how you felt it, sir?
Well, I told you that my contemporaries, in a way, I'm still friendly with 2 or 3 of my contemporaries. One in Australia, and one in England. They were in the same room as I, and they were also, both were students of Dankwart. So we were very good friends. They used to say, Sharma, you're working so hard, you are making our life miserable.
Yes.
And then they told me, you will need minimum 2 months to write your thesis.
Yes.
I said, within 2 weeks, I'm going to write the thesis.
Okay.
If not earlier. And I did that.
Okay.
Although I published so many papers, my thesis is only 90 pages.
Professor Sharma, you told everything, sir, but I still want to ask you, from where your interest for chemical engineering came? Because at that stage,
I can see what happened in Jodhpur. People didn't know. I got motivated because I had interest in mathematics and chemistry.
okay.
So it was interest in chemistry. The only branch of engineering which there is a link with chemistry is
Chemical engineering. True.
That's what motivated me to come to chemical engineering.
True.
And in spite of financial disability and all, God helped me, Almighty helped me, because I got philanthropists. In fact, even while going to Cambridge, there is a philanthropist who helped me. And by the way, I was still sending part of my scholarship money home to support my family.
Yes.
Because they would expect me to earn after my graduation and support the family, a large family. But I said, give me some more time, I'll support you even more vigorously. And I did. Till my father and mother were alive, I kept on supporting. After that, my siblings, thank you. Now once in a while they approach me, I help them.
Professor Sharma, you mentioned that at the age of 27, you became full professor. Was that you never became assistant professor, associate professor, and you were directly elevated to professor level, sir?
Correct.
So why they did that?
See, what happened, the reason was simple. that our first professor was Professor G.P. Kane, who was my greatest benefactor. He went to DGTT as Deputy Director General. Now, for 10 years, there was no professor. The total strength of the staff was 5 and 3 demonstrators. And there also positions were vacant when. So they couldn't appoint a professor for some reason or other. The department was in a very bad state. You know, people, no enthusiasm, and the institute as a whole, they used to crack jokes on chemical engineering. Where is the scope to do PhD in chemical? After 5 years after I joined, I said, well, chemical engineering, beware. PhDs are going to come out left and right. My own colleagues, you know, who used to always say loudly, there's no scope for PhD in chemical engineering, they realize that I bet them hollow. I bet all IITs hollow. In terms of, you're saying my PhD students finished on time. Because I made them think hard, I made them work hard. By example, because I was also working hard. And living in the campus, because you put a question how you mix with the family life. Living in the campus, and the luxury I used to enjoy was lunch at home. So I was never away from my family for more than 5 hours. Right? And my kids who used to cycle around in the campus will enter my room.
Drop in office also.
And drink water from beaker because that was unusual, you know. And all watchmen knew my kids, so there's no resistance put to them. So it was a wonderful time, you know. In city of Bombay, commuting can take a lot of blood out of you. So this benefit of staying on the campus, there was another big benefit that I could summon students who were staying, research students who were in the campus. Sometimes I called them at 10:30. I said, look, there's some interesting idea. Why don't you try? 8:30 in the morning, experiment is on.
Okay.
Never happens in industry.
It's true.
I've been consultant to industry I told you, for more than 50 years. Whatever they may say in the public, the ground reality is totally different. As the company becomes bigger and bigger, it becomes more and more bureaucratic. Because there are layers of system, you know.
Professor Sharma, you also mentioned about how you used to help your PhD students get into industries.
Yes.
I want to ask you, sir, like, there are very less students who get motivated for PhD because they fear they will not get jobs.
I told you in the beginning that I went to the managing directors and general managers. I pleaded that these are bright persons who decided not to take up a job, came for PhD. None of these persons who did PhD was the one who wouldn't have got a job. They would have all got good jobs.
Yes.
So they were convinced. And once they saw their output, see, if I had not, mind you, IIT, sorry to say that, IIT Bombay, right in Bombay, they never went. They never went to industry and pleaded that had PhD.
So that means there's a role a professor can play
Obviously.
in getting,
Council. I was member of the governing council IIT Bombay. I was chairman of the standing committee of the main IIT council. And one of my, I think the internet connection might go away.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
One of my persistent points in Institute of Science and all IITs was that your output of PhD is too low and you guys take too long a time. And I had moral courage to say that none of my PhD students took more than their scheduled time. See, if you become, this fellow will take 5 years, then right from the beginning you are lax. I didn't allow any of that, because even if you are very mature, you are coming out with very good ideas, some more papers might come. I was not lured by that. I was more interested in the welfare of the student. That he is now 25, 26. He must make his career.
That's true.
I may benefit. He may be also benefiting by doing postdoc. In engineering, there is no culture of postdoc. So people take longer time for PhD. Institute of Science, Bangalore, notorious for many years, 6 years, 6.5 years. And I hammered them left and right.
Okay.
Now, IIT Bombay, IIT Madras, IIT, all of them PhD output was no more than 80 to 90. After this persistent pressure, IITs are now producing 350, 400 PhD. I sorry to say, with due modesty, I can tell you all that I was chasing this goal singularly. Today, the culture of IITs have changed because all the old IITs have more postgraduate students than undergraduates.
That's true.